All right, now Ruyter's graft claims have caused uncertainty about the just energy transition. This is a concern of the African Climate Reality Project of the Fair Finance Coalition of South Africa. It's worried the fallout could be an obstacle to the move to clean power sources. It says the public should be more involved in the country's electricity planning processes. Let's get more now from Leanne Govindsamy. She joins us now live from the coalition. Thank you very much for your time, Leanne, here on eNCA. Just firstly, before we talk about some of the claims that he made with that $8.5 million investment for just energy, explain to me what, the challenges would be for us to move to a just energy transition. A lot of the ministers, including Gwede Mantashe, for instance, said that we are not a country that is able to just move to that as quickly as we expected, because a lot of our energy comes from coal and a lot of communities depend on coal for livelihoods.
Thank you, Maseko. So I think that there are a number of challenges, but it's so important to remember that we don't really have a choice in respect of moving away from coal-fired power and moving away from coal. Our coal-fired power stations are very old. They are already failing, as we've all seen. We are experiencing the worst load shedding in South Africa ever. And so those stations have to close. And so entire coal-dependent economies are going to be affected by this. And the thing that we need to do now is move really quickly towards renewable energy for a number of different reasons. So yes, there are challenges, but this is an absolute imperative at this point.
How soon are you suggesting that we move quickly? What is quickly? Especially looking at the fact that with those power stations that we have in Mpumalanga, we're still experiencing your stage 6 load shedding. Some people are suggesting it's actually stage 8 or 10. So how fast do you think this should happen? Because already to just keep our lights on with the power stations we do have, it's taking a lot.
Well, Eskom has a schedule for the decommissioning of these power stations.
Yeah.
In fact, some of them have already been closed. An example is Komati.
Yes.
And there is a plan for repurposing and for addressing the closure of those that particular coal plant. And so, some of the plants are going to be closed between now and 2030, and then only about 1 or 2 are going to be remaining operational beyond 2030. So this is going to happen pretty quickly. And so what we need to do now is build about 6 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity per year in order to replace that coal-dependent electricity supply. So that's the situation that we're in. And as the Fair Finance Coalition Southern Africa, we're saying, look, we need to address the climate crisis and South Africa's contribution to that, given that we're so heavily dependent on coal.
Yeah.
We need to address poverty and inequality. But importantly, we need to address energy security in this country. And the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan and the Just Transition overall provides us with this immense opportunity to address all 3 challenges. The question is, can we do that in a just and equitable manner? And can communities be at the center of that transition, given that they are going to bear the consequences of the closure of those coal-fired power stations?
You mentioned Komati, for instance, which was closed, and you say it will be repurposed. Some people would say maybe this is the reason why we're facing the worst load shedding right now, because there's something that we used to rely on for power, which has now been shut down. Is it a good idea? Some people would also bring in the Ukraine and Russia conflict and the fact that it had the entire European countries reordering coal so quickly because they couldn't get the oil that they needed from Russia or Ukraine.
So, Maseko, I think we must reiterate here that those power stations, they basically no longer work, and so they're no longer serving our needs. They're no longer able to deliver the electricity supply. That's the problem we are facing. Aside from there being issues with the supply of coal to those power stations, right? And we know all the difficulties around rail and various other issues and corruption affecting that entire network. At the end of the day, those stations no longer work. They have to be closed down. We need money to be able to do that. But we don't just need money to decommission and repurpose, but we need money in order to address the kind of social protection measures that would need to come into play once those stations close. I mean, you see, there are entire they are known as coal towns, right? They're entire towns that are dependent on that coal economy. What happens to the informal economy? What happens to somebody who's selling vegetables on the road?
Yeah.
And so that is what we're saying as the Fair Finance Coalition, is that yes, a majority of the finance will go to Eskom, right? And there are concerns around the use of that finance, and we have potential solutions given our expertise and experience. But there are also real opportunities here to almost revive and reconfigure those economies to best serve people, to address pollution and to address poverty and equality, as long as it's done with the proper participation of those involved.
All right, let's talk about this 8.5 billion rand investment for us to move to jet by the European Union. We're talking very important countries, the US, France, Germany, the UK. These are big economies in the world that we need as a country, especially after being grey-listed last week Friday, right? And now you're hearing from the former Eskom CEO, the allegations that there were some in government who tried to water down that 8.5 billion rand for us to move to jet. Should we be concerned as South Africa, looking at the fact that we're talking about the EU here and they might be rattled? Without sounding like I'm saying Andre de Ruyter should have not spoken out if there really is a problem with this particular case, but should we be concerned that maybe, you know, now we've actually rattled the entire European Union when it comes to corruption and Eskom in our country?
Look, I think it will come as no surprise to any of the international partner group member states or the EU or anyone else that we face an immense amount of corruption in South Africa, embedded corruption. I don't think that comes as a surprise. I think at the end of the day, it's something we all recognize and we have to contend with. I think the difference here, recognizing that 8.5 billion is a small percentage of the broader 98.7 billion that we will need for our just transition till up until 2027 at the very least, is that we need these finances. We need it to kick in pretty quickly. We need to address the concerns of our partners and partner countries. Let's be open about the challenges that we face, and let's preempt solutions that could potentially avoid corruption and maladministration related to these deals going forward. For example, there is an immense opportunity here for public finance institutions and external actors to have oversight in respect of the implementation of just transition related projects. And we should lean into that. We should say, let's not merely rely on the South African government and various other entities in order to implement these projects. They've done an incredible job with the JET IP so far, but let's make sure there are additional layers of accountability that could be introduced by public finance institutions. And I think that's where our expertise really comes into play. And that's one of the solutions that we will be presenting during the public consultation taking place on the 27th of March. And I think all South Africans should be interested in this consultation because it involves our energy planning for a really long time.
Leanne, thank you very much for coming into studio and speaking to us. That is Leanne Govindsamy. She represents the Fair Finance Coalition of Southern Africa.